Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Long Hill Report. We're pleased to have Gus Steeves with us. Gus has been here before, but if he wants to introduce himself and his role in humanity, I would like to see it.
My role in humanity, huh?
Yeah. Well,
Can I just make up one?
it's your half hour. I
okay.
only live to make you happy.
Sure, I'm sure you do. No, I'm a town councilor in Southbridge. I've been a reporter for various capacities for quite a few years now.
And what is the journal you are with now?
I'm still with Southbridge Evening News.
And so,
Webster Times. It's Stonebridge Press, and I write for multiple papers.
So if you want the news, please, and you're in this area, you can always pick up the Southbridge Evening News in various places in Southbridge.
You can. It's slipping, unfortunately. I mean,
Well,
we need more people. We need to take it out of the hands of corporate interests and get it back to being a local newspaper.
Well, whatever.
Locally owned, locally run, locally staffed.
That would be good. But,
I mean, our editor is in Meredith, New Hampshire.
well, that's where you see the world from.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Anyway.
It is such a metropolis up there. It's a nice town. I've been there. But it's not a center of anything.
Before we got together here today, before we started recording here, we were speaking about what has happened.
All kinds of things.
And it is a very tough world for print. To my mind, reading the newspaper with your cup of coffee at the kitchen table was one of life's great pleasures. Mm-hmm. But find a newspaper day is getting tougher and tougher. I related to Gus how I was at a rest stop on the Pike. Couldn't, in the store, there was not a newspaper to be found. And 20 years, 30 years ago, there were dozens of them in the morning.
Yep.
So it's a different world.
Yeah. And the ones you can find are unfortunately often carry the same content, either whether they be AP or, either one of the other, press organizations, or they're a lot of just press releases.
There's a lot of that.
There's a lot of that going on. And a lot of it is corporate, unfortunately. And it's gotten to the point where, because the companies that run newspapers these days are often they're so consolidated, and they're often run at the top by Wall Street investment firms that they don't really care about news content anymore. We're seeing newspapers shedding real journalists left and right for years. Look at how many buyouts the Telegram has had in the last 10 years.
Well, isn't it now kind of part of Mass Live?
No, I think last I recall they were a gateway paper, a gatehouse paper.
So it's gone. I mean, it was 30.
But they also, what's weird is that they also own Worcester Magazine, and Worcester Magazine isn't even independent anymore.
Yeah.
It's run out of the Telegram.
And it's lucky to be alive.
It is.
They're all lucky to be alive, which is very, very sad.
It's very bad for local news, for local just social well-being, I think, in general.
This is why more people should be watching the Long Hill Report. It means a lot to all of us anyway.
It's really amazing is that Maureen and I, a couple of months back, somebody called us up because we're both in the Historical Society in Southbridge. And somebody actually called us up saying that they had found a bunch of old newspapers, and they just wanted to give them to the Historical Society. So we came over. We thought, the way he described it, we thought that there was a bunch more than there were. But there were a few dozen. And they were actually really cool. They were mostly telegrams, old Worcester Posts, and old Southbridge Evening News from the 1930s. And if you looked at them, I mean, they had so much more news on the front page than anything that is printed today. Little blurbs about all kinds of things all over the place. Oh. International, local, national, little blurbs like one of them curiously was about her great aunt becoming a nun. Just stuck on the front page. of of a page from 1933 or something like that.
Well, and she probably knew everybody in the town.
She probably did.
So the news is consolidating.
Yeah.
And so really, at that point, why would anybody, with everything on the internet and so much free, why does anybody buy a paper? If they're shrunken paper, and it becomes, what's the point?
Unfortunately, that's true.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the newspapers have actually gone to free delivery. If you can go through, there's a certain U.S. Postal Service process by which, if you can confirm that that enough of the community wants it, you can just have it be mailed, and it will go to everybody.
Yeah,
I don't know what the process actually is,
I
but I
don't
remember
either,
we've
but
done
I
it
get
before.
that from the New Leader, which
Right.
is the Spencer.
Right.
I get that from the Ware River News.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so little news in those too.
Unfortunately, that's true.
So it's it's hard. I mean, I'm surprised that what's the Turley Publications out to the west, and
Right.
What's the New Leader company, the
Stonebridge Press.
Stonebridge Press.
Yeah.
How they keep going. I mean, and
Honestly,
the
so
other thing
am I.
about the Stonebridge and Ware, the big thing about those places, including, and also the Globe even, was classifieds.
True.
The only way you rent an apartment or you got a job was you got the newspaper.
True.
Or you knew somebody, but that was the only way. And with Craigslist and anything else on the internet, gone.
That is true, and that's part of the problem, I think, is that
Yeah.
part of it has been competition from internet sources that, quite frankly, in many cases they don't pay their way either. But you can do it for free.
Yeah. So it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's just the way it is. There's nothing you can do about it, and
It is
there's
kind of-
not going to be. But the internet is also consolidating, and
Yep.
And if you don't toe the line on the internet, it's censorship.
It seems to be sliding in that direction. I think there's still a fair amount of genuine alternative viewpoints out there. I think there are actually many more of them still on the internet than there are in actual print. I mean, a big part. I think that's true in this country, especially because our country has, I guess, an attitude of. I mean, you get the whole American exceptionalism attitude that I think everybody's aware of, but I think we also take great pride in being monolingual and being separate from other people in the rest of the world. And I think that means that, like, for example, if you're living in Europe, you have direct access to multiple languages and multiple viewpoints and multiple ways of seeing the world just because there are multiple languages around you. Whereas, look at the vast majority of people in our country, and I gotta admit, I'm one of them. I speak some Spanish, but I'm not good at it. Are monolingual and have never been anything but monolingual.
Well, if you don't have to cross a border
Exactly.
to get a better bottle of wine.
Exactly.
Oh, of course, you can go to Yankee Spirits, I guess, but it is that close that you're going to have more reasons for interface.
Exactly.
Now, part of the
Unless you're in like a big city like New York.
as a foreign policy person, I'm a neutralist. I think we should have a neutral foreign policy.
Yeah, I agree.
And I get that
I
from
agree.
a French ambassador to the United States who put the argument for why we should be that way.
Yeah.
Is that on the East Coast, they have fish. On the West Coast, they have fish. On the
Okay.
northern border, they have a weak neighbor. On the southern border, they have a weak neighbor. That's the reason to be a neutralist.
That
But
makes
it's
sense.
also a reason not to learn a foreign language.
This is true. This is
Because
true.
your neighbors you're interacting with. I mean, I know there's a famous story. Remember that? I don't know. I didn't ever saw it. The TV show Southie. It was about South Boston, and
okay.
they actually had subtitles.
no, but
They had subtitles for what the people were saying.
okay.
Now, for the South Boston patois, I can understand that because I was born in Dorchester, and I can't understand South Boston to save my life. But no, the point being, in Seattle, I can be understood, probably better than in Boston, but or certainly better than in Springfield. And in Wisconsin, I can be understood.
Yeah.
But unless he's learned another language, the guy from Munich can't be understood by the guy from Aix-en-Champagne, Provence, Aix-en-Provence
Yeah.
in France. He has to learn French, or the Frenchman has to learn German. Has to. There's no real choice there.
Right. Absolutely.
We've got the choice of, see, what's that you're speaking? We've got that choice for the most part because the guy can speak to us in our own language.
Yeah, that's true.
So
that is definitely true.
I see it as a defect, but I don't see it as big a defect as a lot of, the intellectual or aristocracy thinks we're all a bunch of rubes.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that in that sense. I don't think it's an issue of being rubes, because obviously there's a lot of very well-educated, well-read people who only speak English. But I think that has sometimes been used against a lot of common people. I think we saw that, quite frankly, with the derogation of everyday supporters, quite frankly, of Trump over the last several years.
And that's
I disagree with Trump. I can't stand the man.
That's also part.
But the average person is just an average person. They're living their lives. They're working their jobs. Many of them were fairly well educated. I mean, they were recognized. They were supporting this man because he was saying stuff that they wanted to hear. And he was giving the big finger to the people that they couldn't stand in the first place.
And he wasn't doing the old sire, the peasants are revolting thing.
This is true.
And it's not like the peasants are as stupid as you think they are. And they're happy to tell you to hell with you to Cambridge.
Right. I mean, that's part of the problem, is that I think we have allowed there to be a division created between the intellectuals in our society and everyone else.
Okay, when you say we have allowed,
I mean
we
our
don't get
society.
a say.
No, this is true. We don't. You're
Gus,
right.
I mean,
this is true.
We might have different philosophies here and there, but we don't get the say.
This is true.
Because we probably wouldn't. We might have differences of opinion with our neighbors and stuff like that, but we don't get the decision.
This is true.
And so yeah, it's. But it's. You could get a little into the weeds with this and say, do we have an Illuminati in this country running things who have decided to separate everybody according to little tribes to keep them divided? I don't know. Where does that come
directly.
from?
But I think that there's.
I usually go. Have you ever heard the Marxist term correlation of forces?
I think I kind of have.
So
I kind of
things
understand
that
it.
might come together,
Yeah.
that work together, even if they're not allied or like each other. But
Yes.
yeah,
That makes sense.
That's part. But how does that work? I don't see.
Well, I think if you look at it, I think to some degree, yeah, I don't necessarily think there's a conspiracy per se going on. I think it goes back to gradually. It's something that's been gradually developing, probably for the last century or so, with the development of, you know who Edward Bernays was, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
the advertising.
Exactly. I mean, he was the guy who coined the term propaganda.
Yeah.
And obviously it became kind of sour, so he changed it to public relations after Hitler showed up. But it's really the same stuff. It's still propaganda. And it's been taken over by corporate interests. And we've got so many variant ways of trying to keep us focused on narcissistic needs and small group issues and things like that, because it's profitable. Whereas big picture issues, quite frankly, if we were to deal with big picture issues, it would scare the hell out of them.
Okay, give me this big picture issue that if the lower orders started to focus on would scare them. And could we? I mean,
Medicare for all.
What?
Medicare for all.
Medicare for all.
We had some talk about it from a few people, but they don't want to do it because it would start cutting into the profits of giant medical companies, drug companies. It would start cutting into the insurance company racket. I mean, we can see. Look, if you look at the way the military provides care for its people, that's essentially a single payer system, and it works.
It works.
Every once in a while they have issues. Like, and no system is perfect, but it works.
I actually used to have that as my service.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure. Okay, I'm going to give you what Medicare for all, and I think we'll get it. And I'm not saying it's the world's worst idea, but I'm going to give you what will happen. You've lived in Massachusetts all your life, most of your life?
Mostly.
All right. You know what the MBTA is?
Yep.
The MBTA, I took it every day for years.
Yeah.
So I lived in Brighton, close to, way out in the Green Line.
Yeah.
And I'd wait for the train, and sometimes the train would get there, and it would take me to work. And most of the times it did, or at the worst, late. At the very worst, very, very late. And I counted on it breaking down. You know why I counted on it breaking down? Because I like to read. So I'm going into work. The only thing I didn't want was the lights to go out. And I usually brought something to, thing for my book. And then it would get going again.
Yep.
And the boss would say, MBTA, yeah. Okay. That's what you will get. And then it would go broke periodically, and we would bail it out.
Mm-hmm.
And
but I think that's the difference. Is it needs to be public and run in the first place. None of this middleman shit. Pardon my French.
Let me make my point.
Get the middleman out of it.
Let me make my point. So then they don't go broke, and we bail them out, and maybe we bump up the price of the fare a little every now and then. And so that's what you'll get with Medicare. You can say, get rid of this, get rid of that. No system gets rid of it. It ossifies.
Some truth to
So
that.
as I was talking with my cousin who's in the medical field, and my two first cousins who are about as close as I have to brothers, we Zoom every month. And I said, you'll have a health care.
Yeah.
Most people will live. And he said, that could be the slogan for it. Most people will live. Anyway, I said, yeah, I coined that. You got it from me. And we're going to make that the selling point. Most of you people will live. But that's going to be your system, because that's what you get for a system like that. Now, I have Medicare. I don't know if you do.
No.
Guess
I'm not
what?
that old.
I have to pay and get another policy on top of that.
Well, that's part of the problem. It shouldn't be that way.
It will be that.
It should be set up in such a way that it covers everything that's basically necessary.
Good luck. You will get. Most people will live. That's your system going to be. And I don't have a problem with that being the system. Because, no system is perfect, and that will limp along. And I'm limping along. So what the heck? But don't have any illusions that it's going to be anything else but.
I'm not saying, I don't expect anything, I don't expect perfection, but I think it's better than what we have now.
It's going to be most people will live. That's it. You can live with, write that down. I wouldn't say this or brag about it if my cousin said, that's it, you got it. Because he's in the field. But so that's what we'll get, and we'll get it. And I'm okay with the poor people, middle poor, lower poor, or middle, black, white, everybody getting together and saying, to hell with the Sacklers, the hell with all these people. I have nothing against that. You really think they're fighting against that? I mean, Liz hasn't been that, she's called for it a little. But she hasn't been out front in that. Marky's
None of them are.
So do you think it's because corporate donors get to donate to them? Or
I think that's a big part of it.
Okay.
And all the lobbyists are the ones that write the laws.
Oh, yeah.
In many respects.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, look at how often you hear about bills that pass before they even read them. And they're 500 pages
you
or
remember-
5,000 pages
you-
long. How
you-
can you possibly read that?
You remember what Liz, what's her name, Pelosi said about it? Now,
Yep.
5,000, was it, I'm sure you read.
I think it was the Patriot Act, wasn't it?
No, I think it was the health care bill.
Okay.
Under Obama.
ACA?
What?
We can read it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Something to that effect.
Because
Yeah.
it was unreadable. And the one of the black congressmen from one of the southern states said, oh no, it was, what's his name? I think he was from Detroit.
Okay.
Said,
Is that
we don't
Lewis?
read the bills. We can't read the bills. Now, that was honest, but you can't read that. Now, did you ever read, I know you read, I'm not going to say do I read, that would be insulting to say, but Gulliver's Travels.
A long time ago.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
there's a point in there, and that's one of the greatest political books ever, where he's before a king of one of these other societies that he comes across. He says, no bill can pass our legislature if it is more than the number of letters in our alphabet.
Okay.
Unless you have a law like that, or say 100 words, or maybe a page, you are not going to have these people reading the bills. First of all, they can't stay awake that long. But that you're not going to have that.
Well, I think a big part of the problem, of course, is that as time has gone along, we've seen this in our country since day one, that the bills have gotten longer and longer and longer.
Exactly, the
And
point
they're-
of Gulliver.
Yeah, that's true. And it's all of these little details that are slid in Section 2235.
Yes.
They benefit a company with this address and this
And why do
location,
you
but they don't
think-
mention
why
the
do you
name
think
specifically.
Medicare for all isn't going to become like that, and that's the problem.
I'm
We
not
need-
disagreeing that it
when,
could be a
when
problem.
We
need
when
to
I
fix
take
a
power,
much bigger
Gus
system.
will be in charge of the Medicare for All bill, and he
Okay.
can keep it down. But save that, it ain't happening. Do you disagree with that?
That may be true.
You won't. It may be true. You're not going to go on that limb and go with me and jump in the water. I understand. I
That
wouldn't
could be
either.
true.
I wouldn't get.
That could be true. Too.
So we got to get to that point if we're going to have Medicare for all, which is not just a grand registry of motor vehicles,
Which doesn't do anything.
You want to.
You pay money for a plastic card, and then what do? You pay a bunch of money for other stuff that doesn't really do anything for you.
And so you're talking me, if not yourself, into becoming a libertarian when you say those things.
Socially, I guess I kind of am a libertarian. I always have been.
Why wouldn't you be governmentally? I mean, because what you've just you're pushing me in that direction.
Well, I think that I think there's a mix of stuff that we can do collectively with government that we can't do, on the small scale. But on the flip side, to go back to something we were talking about before the camera started rolling, I think it really is time to think about and really take time in our society to consider how big the scale is that's functional. Because right now, the scale that we have is not functional in far too many respects. It's too easy to slide. It's too easy for selfish interests to weave their way into our government and corrupt it for their own interests.
Especially if you have 1,000-page bills.
Oh, totally, absolutely.
So
it's really easy.
So
to
how do you get between
and happens all the time.
the legislation no bigger than the alphabet? Where's the happy medium between that and the 1,000-page bill?
Well, I mean, legally, I bet a lot of those 1,000-page bills they're probably illegal, because doesn't the law already say they can only have like one subject per bill?
The law says what I say it says.
That's part of the problem, is that they do whatever they say. Oh, well, we'll have a lawyer say that this is actually related to this, which is related to this, which is related to this. We can put it all in the same bill.
Okay, I want the guy that we're going to do this again someday. We still got some time left, but your commission is to come up with Gus plan for good government. Because, I'm twice your age. Well, maybe not. But I look like twice your age. So I've been around the block.
Yeah.
And Nirvana is always just a little if we get Senator so-and-so in, if the caucus is elected, the bumper sticker says, my caucus should be governor. If Obama's president, I mean, after all, he's got to be better than these white guys because he's authentic. And
oh yeah, he was authentic.
And he kills Libya, but what the heck? Somebody ought to.
Did you ever notice that whole election, the symbolism? I mean, it made him look like Pepsi.
What?
That weird O thing that was used as a symbol.
Yeah.
What was that?
Of course that was. But that's what Bernays. You're talking about Bernays.
Absolutely. That was exactly my point. Is that all of these politicians are just products now?
Yeah.
They're totally products.
They're totally products. And if Joe Biden, I mean, Biden had to come after Trump. Because, I mean, you got Trump, hyper man. I mean, he didn't even, his English was, just weird.
He said all
but
kinds
it was he. At least you got the idea. It was him. And Biden, are we waking him? I mean, so
True.
we've talked about, Dick and I did a show on my electoral reform. But this is everything, my law.
Yeah.
Everything eventually reduces to its absurd. Dick's law Vaughn's law is nobody knows how to run a government, but we're always going to have a government. That's Vaughn's law. And I think if you work within those two, you'll understand American government. But
every other government that's ever existed.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
True.
I mean, China now seems to be on the ascent. China is episodically golden age or hell.
This is true. Absolutely. They've done it repeatedly for 5,000 years. Yeah.
And we're at the point, like I said, empires last, and this is now an imperial power.
Oh, absolutely it is. It has been for a while.
250 years, roughly.
Yeah.
That it's time we either have a paradigm shift of vast, and we better get it right,
Yeah.
or it's hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
All bets are off.
Yeah. Imperially history speaking, empires tend to do this. That's what they do.
Well,
and eventually they stabilize.
Actually, kind of.
Well, they rise obviously, and then they kind of stair step their way down through history.
Yeah, can you follow the bouncing ball, people out there? But no, it's an arc, and we can discuss the exact nature of the arc, but it's some kind of arc that
it doesn't do this. Generally, in most cases.
In most cases, Assyria basically did that.
Actually, Assyria lasted about 1,100 years.
It
went through boom and bust cycles.
It did, but the last time out,
it got conquered.
Well, it got conquered.
Conquerors tend to do that.
It got conquered by the Medes and Persians in Babylon. But what they had done was they had stopped conscripting the native for their army. Mm-hmm. So they basically had a foreign army. Yeah. So that was kind of the last time was kind of out the door.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But interesting.
I remember reading somebody, I don't remember who said it, had described the Assyrian state toward the end as being basically a dead man in armor.
Yeah, but it wasn't an empire for a lot of the time.
Most of the time, it wasn't. Yeah, it was just a little core state that that nobody paid attention to.
Yeah.
It went through a couple of imperial phases.
But then again, don't we all?
Some do. I mean, it's interesting that I don't know if you follow like Middle Eastern history any. But I think it's interesting that I see a lot of common ground between what we're doing today and what the Ottomans did in the late years of their state. I mean, we've got a very strong military-industrial complex that basically runs the show. and that they, in their, I remember one of the people I was reading was talking about how their state basically required a reasonably successful war just to keep their economy going. When they kept losing the wars, their economy fell apart, and they eventually got to the point where mostly British and French interests came in and took over their state.
Well,
And we're kind of seeing that, only in our case, is corporate interests are coming in and taking over our state.
that is basically true. I mean, it sort of started to go downhill after Vienna because they really took a
Because they started losing.
that was a big defeat.
Yeah.
Prince Eugen and the Austrian state was on their rise.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's how it works. We're basically at the end of our half hour, and it's been no holds barred, and I'm very grateful for you to being here.
Thanks for having me.
Please subscribe. Email me, and I will subscribe you to my Substack now that the Stonebridge Times succumbed to COVID.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. Do you have any place you want people to get in touch with you? Or are you hiding from the world?
I'm not really hiding from the world. I don't currently have a blog running.
Okay.
I did several years ago. Every once in a while I think about doing it, but I just haven't gotten around to doing it.
Okay. Please, the email will be on the screen, and please subscribe, and you can watch us on YouTube at The Long Hill Report. Thank you.